Hello, and welcome to the Miss Mo Storyteller Podcast, where I tell you stories so you can tell stories to each other. I'm your storyteller, Mo Reynolds. Let's get started. Today's story comes from the enchanting, magical land of India. I found this story in a book called Tales of India with gorgeous illustrations. I will put the link in the notes below. I highly encourage you to check it out. It is full of some really unique folk tales. And though this one today had some wacky parts, I just couldn't resist it because it was so much fun to discover. So, let us begin. Once upon a time, in the land of India, there was a Brahmin. Now, the Brahmins were at the very top of Indian society, and this particular Brahmin and his wife had a little girl, and this little girl loved to be in love. This young girl would see another young man kicking a ball and think, "Oh, I love him." And then she would see a different young man, and he was helping his mother fetch water from the well, and she thought, "Oh, I love him." She wanted to run away and marry every little boy, and then every young man she met. Her parents had to pretty much keep her under lock and key to protect her from her own romantic notions. Well, a little ways away from where they lived, there lived a tiger. And not just any tiger. This was a magical, shape-shifting tiger. And not just any magical, shape-shifting tiger. This was a magical, shape-shifting tiger who loved curry. And who can blame him? I also love curry. Well, this tiger was tired of making his own food. And he thought what he needed was a wife who could cook for him and clean for him. And when he heard through the wind that there was a girl, the daughter of a Brahmin, who was boy crazy and ready to marry, well, he knew his plan. The young woman had developed and grown and was now at the marrying age, and the Brahmin and his wife wanted to marry her off as quickly as they could. And so the Brahmin's daughter was there by the river, and the handsome man-tiger, who had changed himself into a very tall, strapping young man, came to the river. The woman and the man locked eyes. Boom! She was in love. The handsome man-tiger proposed. The girl swooned, and her parents approved. The next morning, they were married. The mom and dad were in a hurry. Well, they stayed with the bride's family for about a month to get to know each other, and everything seemed to be going all right. But the handsome man-tiger started craving his home and his tiger food. And so he told his bride that it was time for them to go to their new home together. The bride's parents asked the groom to please care for their little girl, let her rest when she was tired, let her eat when she was hungry, and he promised to do so. Turns out, tigers aren't very good at keeping promises. As they began to walk towards the new home, the girl saw a little pond with a bench nearby, and she took her husband's hand and said, "Why don't we sit down? I'm tired of walking. Could we sit on that bench and eat the picnic that my mother packed?" And he spoke in this new kind of voice she hadn't heard. It was almost growling. And he said, "No. Do not ask again, or you will see who I am." The young bride was confused and a little frightened, and she did not speak again until they got to the home. But then, with some curiosity and perhaps a little courage, she turned to her new husband with her hands on her hips and said, "So, who are you?" She immediately wished that she hadn't asked that question. Suddenly before her, the man turned into the tiger, striped and angry and hungry. The tiger spoke, motioned to these 6 big pots, almost like bathtubs, outside the front of the home, and he said, "You are now my wife, and you will fill these pots with delicious food every day. If I do not like the food, I will eat you." As you can imagine, this was not the new marriage that the young woman had wanted. It became a pretty miserable life, living with a tiger who might possibly eat you if you didn't fill 6 bathtubs with curry that he loved every day. One day she was cooking and crying, and a crow came and landed in the windowsill. It was eating spilled rice. And then the crow kindly looked at this young woman. The young woman felt the crow's eyes turned and saw the crow and felt something like hope. She risked speaking to the crow. "Could you help me?" she asked. And the crow answered, "Yes." And that might sound ridiculous, but at this point, I don't think that's a hard part to believe in the story. And so the young woman wrote a letter to her brothers, and she drew a map to her new home. She tied it to the leg of the crow and begged her to fly swiftly to her family. The crow flew off in the air and found the brothers. They opened the letter and looked at the map, and they prepared to leave immediately to save their little sister. Now let's talk about these brothers. Their heart was absolutely in the right place, but they weren't exactly the sharpest tools in the shed. Let me prove my point. They were in a hurry, right? Their youngest sister had accidentally married a tiger, and her life was in danger every day. There was no time to dilly-dally. Well, they started walking along, and suddenly brother number 1 noticed a donkey grazing in the grass just off the path. He had always wanted a donkey, and here was one just standing there for the taking. He begged his brothers to stop and bring the donkey along. They didn't think this was a good idea, but he so wanted his own donkey, and so they agreed. And now they were walking along with a donkey who had to stop every once in a while to eat some grass and drink some water. And as they were walking, the second brother stopped, both of his brothers and the donkey, and said, "Look at that." And that was an ant crawling across the path. Not an exciting ant or a huge ant or a magical ant, just a little black 6-legged ant. And so brother number 2 picked up this little ant and cradled it in his hands, and they kept walking. Brother 3 looked at his 2 brothers with their donkey and the ant and thought to himself, "A donkey and an ant are not going to be able to save our sister from a tiger. We need a weapon." And he knew just the thing. So he reached up and he broke off a branch from a palm tree, and he thought, "This'll do it. This will kill the tiger." Again, their hearts were in the right place. Well, they had walked for a very long time. They got tired, and they stopped at the same pond where their sister had wanted to stop months before. They had some rice to share between them, but they were very thirsty. Heroics are thirsty work. And so they drank from the pond. They drank and they drank. The 3 of them drank the entire pond dry. With their stomachs now very full of water, they left the pond and continued, the 3 brothers, the donkey, the ant, and the palm tree branch. Soon they found their sister's new home. She was thrilled to see them. They were there to rescue her, but she knew the tiger would be back any moment, and so she told them to hide in the loft, to climb the ladder and tuck themselves away upstairs. I do not know how they got the donkey up the ladder, not an important part of the story, but somehow all 3 brothers, the donkey, the ant, and of course the palm tree branch, were tucked away upstairs. The tiger walked in the door. He sniffed the air, and there were a lot of new smells in that house. Something was suspicious, and a low growl came from his throat. Perhaps it was the growl that did it. Fear, or maybe the donkey sitting on his lap, made brother number 1 pee his pants. He began to pee, and he peed, and he peed, and he peed. Well, brother number 2 had been holding it in. I mean, after all, they had each drunk 1/3 of an entire pond. But when he heard his brother peeing, well, then he let go. And when the 3rd brother heard his first 2 brothers peeing, well, then he let go. And they peed so much that it came down through the ceiling, flooded the kitchen, pooling around the tiger's feet. The tiger growled, "What is this?" And the young bride didn't know what else to say but the truth. My brothers," she said. "They just came to check on me." The tiger thought to himself, Her brothers can pee this much? They must be bigger than I remember." And suddenly the tiger was nervous. "Well," he said, I'll say hello to them. It's only the polite thing to do." And he walked over to the ladder, propped up against the wall. And just then the second brother had an idea. He took the ant and he let it go into the donkey's ear, where the ant bit the inside of the donkey's ear. And the donkey overreacted, but this was good. The donkey screamed and hollered, and it was hoarse and loud and angry, and the tiger began to shake. "They are that big, and they are that loud. I don't know if I want to meet these brothers." But still, he called upstairs and he asked them very politely to come down the ladder. Brother number 3 lowered the palm branch. And when the tiger reached out and felt the sharp spines of the palm leaf, he thought, "They fill my kitchen. They roar like an angry donkey, and their legs are sharp like this." He looked at his wife. She wasn't worth it. She wasn't worth angering brothers like these. He'd find someone else to make his curry. He begged her to leave and ran away into the jungle. And so the woman returned with her brothers and the donkey and the ant and the palm tree branch. Her mother and father were delighted to see her, and she agreed that she would date a little more before she decided to marry again, and she would make sure that her brothers approved. And while there's no guarantee, that was a much better start to finding her happily ever after. I hope you enjoyed that story. Families try their best to show up for us. It just isn't always as smooth as we want it to be. Thanks for tuning into this story. Click on the links below to learn more about the wonderful country of India. If you're enjoying this podcast, please let me know in the comments. And more importantly, please share it with your family and friends, teachers, anyone that you think would love to travel the world through stories. And if there's a country from which you would really like to hear a story, then let me know in the comments below. For now, keep listening to stories, keep telling stories, as we all try to find our own happily ever after. Thanks for listening.